afternoon, and welcome back to this week's episode of Since I Was Young, a podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. We, of course, ended 2025 with a disappointing defeat in the Edinburgh Derby at the hands of Hibernian by 3 goals to 2. But Derek McInnes tasked his men with making an immediate return to form with the first game of 2026, which will be the focus of this week's episode against Livingston. We took Livingston on at the weekend just gone there and managed a, now whichever way you want to put it and whoever you want to talk to, I'm sure they'll kind of describe it in different ways. I've heard it be called a professional victory, I've heard it being called a nervous win, I've heard it being called a controlled game. I've heard lots of different things, and I'm sure we'll touch on them all as we go this week. I am delighted as ever to be joined by John. How are you getting on this week, sir?
I'm delighted to be here with you as always, Alan. I am absolutely Baltic. I don't know about you, but it's freezing cold in Glasgow.
Oh, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I was out earlier on and it was -2 or something. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with it. But on that, it's, we're in the January transfer window and things are ticking along nicely there. But shall we just get dived into this week's episode?
I think we should. Yeah. Are we going to touch on the unpleasantness of last week?
I mean, we can touch on it as we go. I don't think it warrants much conversation. We were due to record an episode last week for everybody watching and listening. However, a sickness bug took over, and we were unable to sit down and record our thoughts on the disappointing defeat against Hibs. I think there was enough messages going back and forward in the group chat that we all kind of felt very much the same about it.
Yeah, it wasn't good enough. It was as simple as that. And the game that we are here to discuss today on Saturday. We played on Sunday, right?
Mate, the days
it's that time of year where it's just like, what date even is it?
You're not
no, I think it was Saturday. It was the 3rd.
Saturday, aye.
So I think it was imperative that Hearts respond, especially in front of a home crowd at Tynecastle, with Rangers seemingly on the ascendancy. It's important that we continue to get points on the board. We did that. You used quite a few descriptors there that you've seen bandied around. The one I would probably prefer to use would be unconvincing. It was not a particularly pretty game of football. It was a game of football against a team that have 9 points on the season. They're absolutely dreadful. We should have done better. That being said, I will take 3 points.
Yeah. I think it's fair. I think we can just kind of get stuck into the Livingston game. I think that the Hibs game we don't need to talk about it. The main thing was to bounce back from that defeat and put in a performance against Livingston. And I saw a lot of people talking about the team selection prior to it going out, prior to the Livingston game, and a lot of people said, there should be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different players in. We should bring in Kirjota on the right. We should shake things up, play Kabangu, shake the team up a little bit. But to know Derek McInnes is to know that was very unlikely to happen. I think the best thing he did was not make too many changes because the players, for as much as we won't talk too much on the Edinburgh Derby, they, in the last sort of 20 minutes of that game, put in a decent attempt, albeit that was the sort of only period of the game that we actually played any football. But Derek McInnes would have wanted those players to kind of bounce back and prove that was just a blip, just a one-off, just a disappointing day at the office. And there was a couple of changes. Obviously, a debut for 22-year-old Jordi Altina, who's joined us just at the beginning of the January transfer window. And we also had a midfield 3 with Benny returning to the starting 11 with Benny, Devlin and Magnussen. Magnussen playing that slightly further forward of the 3. And then obviously Shankland, Braga, Kizaridis up front, and the usual suspects in defence. I was happy with the lineup. I felt like it made a lot of sense. And I think, just to kind of talk about Jordi Altina for a minute, he came in, obviously, a lot of, I'm not going to hype, but I think some sort of expectation because of the fact that right back has been such a glaringly obvious weakness for us, not just this season, but I think previously as well. We've not really had a solid right back since the days of Michael Smith, which pains me to say it because I was a big Natty Atkinson fan, but my sweet prince is back in Australia living life, so fair play to him. But it was, performance was pretty solid.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it's been a while that right back has been an issue. We've talked about it extensively on the podcast the last couple of years. I think this season, with how well Hearts have overall performed, it's a bit more pronounced. It feels like that's the one glaring weak area of the pitch that we have. Did we see enough from Altona to put to bed any notion that he's not the saviour or the second coming of Michael Smith? I don't know, but he certainly came out of the blocks pretty well. Defensively, doesn't look great. Solid, I guess, but going forward, he seems very confident. And of course, he popped up with an assist for the first goal of the game, which of course would turn out to be the only goal of the game in a nightmarishly dull last hour or so, which wasn't helped by the atmosphere. It felt like a fucking library half the time.
Yeah,
I must admit. But anyway, to get back to the point, Altona, impressed, but not overly impressed.
that's fair. I think I was very impressed, I have to be honest. I think you're right in the sense of his defensive capabilities, but again, he wasn't really tested defensively enough for me to sort of say, do you know what, he's not a great defender. He's just good at going forward. I think we saw quite early in the game there was a lot of the ball going straight to him, and it was very much, Schwolov was using him, and the ball just seemed to sort of, certainly in the first 20 minutes or so, he seemed to be the one that was the outlet, which was unusual considering he's only been in the club for a matter of days and he only had 2 training sessions prior to playing against Livingston. So it shows you that he's obviously made an impression in that early spell, because, I mean, nobody would have cried if Steinbender was playing at right back. Oisin McEntee has also played a few times there, obviously, this season. However, he apparently has an injury. But yeah, for Jordi Altona to be sort of thrown in at the deep end, albeit a home game against Livingston, is not exactly, a pressure cooker cauldron of noise that the bigger games are going to be. But maybe that worked to his advantage. But like you say, the early stages of the game, we controlled it. That first half, in general, we were absolutely outstanding. Some of the play was fluid, the movement was fantastic with the front players, and I do think a lot of that did flow through Altona. He was certainly involved a lot, and obviously his cross for the opening goal and the winning goal was a fantastic cross. He mentioned in his after-match interview, he said, the players are just telling me, just get down the line and cross the ball, we'll be in the box. And he was basically saying, he's like, I'm happy with that because I love to cross, I love getting the ball in, and I love putting it in dangerous positions. And ultimately that's why he's been brought to the football club. He's basically a Harry Milne for the right hand side, because we've spoken about it and you mentioned it there, the balance of our team, not just this season but in general. The left hand side has always looked pretty solid, whether it's Kingsley or Milne or Kizaridis in front of them. The left side feels kind of set, albeit we probably could do with backup to Kizaridis if we're being greedy. But the right side has always had question marks. But I felt like against Livingston, particularly in that first 45, it was a real positive threat.
Yes, absolutely. Like I say, kind of surreal to have that down the right, because we're so used to watching it be so slanted, and we're slightly one-dimensional in that sense going forward. Like wide play wise, if you know that we're going to try and exploit the left, we try to use Kizaridis as our creative outlet. We now have that option in our belt of, like, we can exploit both flanks, which means that we are going to be less predictable, which can only end in happy things for us as Hearts fans. The question, I think, really is who plays in front of Altona, because if at any point we want to go back to the 4-4-2 structure or play Braga and Shankland as strikers together in any sort of system, who have we had that's been convincing in the right side of attack outside of the 3 guys that played at the weekend? Like, there's only so many spots on the field, and if we have Altona, who I think the jury's still out in terms of whether he's going to be a defensive upgrade on what we've used, but if he is able to display defensive qualities on top of the attacking nous that he's got, then we might have a bit more freedom with what we can do down the right flank, because obviously the Steinvender or McEntee and Milne on the right hand side, that worked for a short time. It obviously sort of ran out of steam a bit. So like ultimately, I guess the point I'm trying to make here, and I'm rambling a lot early on in the show this week.
It's
John's,
absolutely fine.
yeah, John's ADHD brain has kicked in big time today. He gives us a lot more freedom down the right flank, which I think is going to open up possibilities to play Kyrgiota or the like on the right hand side more often, instead of having to rely on the tried and tested from earlier in the season, because we always had to have that one eye on the right back position. So we can't send someone too far forward on the right, because we feel exploited or potentially exposed rather on the right hand side at right back. That might not be a problem anymore. Like I say, I haven't seen enough from him to be confident about that, but I certainly see signs that it could be. We could. What?
Sorry.
What is going on over there?
I have been listening to you, but yeah, we've been invaded. Yeah, the puppy has appeared and she's made her podcast appearance today.
Yeah.
Are you happy?
So
Are you happy?
I have been continuously rambling for the last couple of minutes to try and give you time to finish up with the dog.
You're absolutely fine. Be with me.
I'll continue
Sorry.
rambling for a bit then.
No, you're absolutely fine. She's away. She was getting. She's a new puppy that we have. She's just turned a year old, and whenever she can hear me but can't see me, she goes a bit tonto. But we're hopefully all good. Yeah. Where were we? I've lost my train of thought now.
You've lost your train of thought. My train of thought's been derailed.
I don't even think I had a train, mate. I've got an empty station, to be honest with you. But what was I going to say? Yeah, but back on track. I think the long-term prospects of Jordi Alton are certainly very encouraging. And I know it's early doors. And listen, I remember a certain right-back from Costa Rica that came in and played an absolute blinder on his debut, and then had an absolute stinker, ironically, against Dundee in his next game, which obviously is our next game. So we shall see what happens with Jordi Altona, but hopefully he's more Michael Smith and less that Costa Rican right back whose name Taylor. That's it. It's just gone completely out of my head. See, empty station. But yeah, back to the game itself. The first half, we had some chances. We should have been out of sight. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. We had Harry Milne head one straight at the goalkeeper. Well, it wasn't quite straight at the goalkeeper. It was a decent save from the keeper. We had as well Braga hitting the post from a deflected shot. We had Thomas Bent Magnusson, who I liked in the game, but I also felt like he had a little bit of sort of headless chicken about him a little bit. He was getting forward into dangerous positions, but just not having that final killer instinct. And I think that position, depending on how the shape of the team is going forward, that position is going to be one that will be very, very interesting to see who fills that in. You know, is it going to be Ajew when he comes back, or is Thomas Bent Magnusson being sort of moulded into that sort of player? Because he was making intelligent runs, he was getting into good places, and the one chance that sticks out for me was the Shanklin ball across the box, and he was at the back post and he just slides in and doesn't get enough on it and puts it wide. But for him to be getting into those positions, it shows something. But it is a position that I'm not going to say I have concerns about. I think a lot of people say, obviously, we've been in the market for a right back, we've needed a right back for a while, we now have one. A sort of second position that a lot of people talk about is a creative central midfielder, someone that breaks into the box and gets involved. And you could put players like Neuenhoff in that bracket, but that man seems to be made of glass. You could put Blair Spittle in that bracket, but again, another one that's just not consistent enough with it. So hopefully Ajew is that guy that can come in and do that as and when he's available to do so. But half-time comes around of the Livingston game. We're ahead 1-0, thanks to, as I say, the Livingston goalkeeper playing an absolute blinder and our players just having left their shooting boots in the dressing room. But I wasn't concerned, I wasn't worried, which I tend to be at half-time in games at points. But I felt like if we went out in the second half and played like we did in the first half, we would steamroller them and maybe score 2 or 3 more. But never has an expression, a game of two halves, been more appropriate for that particular performance at Tynecastle.
100%, man. Yeah. the energy just seemed to suck right out of them at the start of the second half, and it never really returned. There were a couple of bright spots, but nothing that you could call a really clear cut opportunity. Um, Rather disappointing, like I say, against a team that have 9 points total this season. We really need to be taking the opportunity against a team like Livingston, as bad as they've been, to try and improve that goal difference as much as possible. Because later in the season, goal difference could well be what decides our fate if things continue along the trajectory that they have so far this season. We're already halfway in. Um, there's it's not going to last forever this season. It's going to be over before we know it, especially if we're having good times, because they never last. We need to score goals where the opportunities present themselves in matches against, on paper, weaker opponents. I felt we were quite wasteful at the weekend, I'll be honest. You mentioned the Bent Magnuson slide in. I felt that the ball was struck. I think it was supposed to be a shot from Shankland. It was struck with too much pace for Magnuson to get on the end of. I felt that if the ball had been played into him instead of just kind of sclaffed across the face of goal, you're looking at a second goal there. That should have been a tap in, but it was sort of rattled across the face of goal with very little chance of anyone getting toward it. Time after time after time, yes, the Livingston goalkeeper made some really nice saves, but we were making it easy for him more often than not. Like you say, like a lot of them were just straight at him. We need to be doing better than that against teams like Livingston, I feel, especially in the aftermath of the Derby defeat.
Yeah.
For Hearts to come out with anything full of anything less than piss and vinegar from minute 1 to minute 90 would have been completely unacceptable. So yes, I'm glad to get 3 points. Not overly enthused by the performance overall, though. I felt that it was an unconvincing win against a team that we should have hammered. The best chance for Hearts, other than the goal, was belonged to Ryan McGowan, for crying out loud.
That's true.
What a header it was! Yeah,
the man's always been deadly from a yard. You know, he was a wee bit
exactly.
further out. I think it was maybe too far out for him to score that one. But I feel like
he doesn't have the crazy neck muscles that Halkett has, who can loop in a header from 400 yards. You know what I mean?
I was going to say, like, I spoke about the Altena assist, but I didn't talk about the header itself for the goal. It was a fantastic header from Halkett. It felt like he barely had to get off the ground to put it in the net. But
utterly bamboozled the goalkeeper as well. Like he looked like to me, it looked like the goalkeeper was assuming it was well wide, and then it just looped into the fantastic stuff.
It was a cracking header, and you know that, like you said there, the second half was much more of a workhorse type performance. I think Livingston grew into the game because I think maybe we sunk into ourselves a little bit. I do feel like the bench didn't have a lot of great options on it either in terms of game changers, which I think is something that obviously we've got players that are injured at the moment that ideally would be on the bench, and obviously we are still awaiting Islam Chesnikov's registry for Hearts. I think his visa was approved today, but he's not available. There was hope that he would be in the stadium for the game against Livingston and perhaps paraded at half time, but that was bed by, I think, a delayed flight from Amsterdam, if I remember rightly. He touched down just after full time and then was taken to Tynecastle, and obviously I assume did all the media things and met with Derek McInnes, etc. But hopefully that will be announced in the next day or two. May well be announced by the time you're watching and listening to this. So he will provide another option, like we said, perhaps down that right hand side. But in terms of the game, the second 45, like I say, Livingston went a bit more direct. I think they made a lot of chances with that big Teddy Yengi. He was a real threat for them. I thought defensively we were okay. I don't think we were caught out as often as I think some people are kind of painting it as a second half that Livingston dominated. I wouldn't suggest that. I think they just had some chances when in the first half they didn't have any, and we didn't really have that many chances in the second half either. So for as much as I've heard lots of people say, you know, it's a Jekyll and Hyde, it's, you know, first half brilliant, second half garbage, I don't think I could agree with that. I think the second half we just, as I say, sunk into ourselves a little bit. Derek McInnes mentioned there could have perhaps been some sort of psychological hangover from the Kilmarnock game where we were leading 1-0 and then obviously ended up only getting a point from that game. Ideal world, you want to blow these teams away and have the games done by half time, but in another world, in another day, that would have been what happened at Tynecastle on Saturday. It just wasn't to be. But I think the point that I wanted to make I think for me it shows the psychology of this team and it shows where they're at, because in as much as Livingston improved and as much as we sunk in a little bit, we still had the bottle and we still stuck in and we threw our bodies in front of things. We Cammy Devlin doing we Cammy Devlin things. Yes, we shouldn't need to resort to that against a side like Livingston, but with each passing game, and I posted on Twitter about it, we're 20 games into the league season. We've got 18 games to go. There's 18 cup finals now for us, and every game is going to feel like that. There will be periods in every game from now to the end of the season where we'll either need to be hanging on or we'll need to show that mental strength if we are to do the unthinkable. Now, I'm not sitting here saying we're going to win the league, despite the fact that we're 6 points clear and bookies are making us title favourites, which to me just makes me feel even more uneasy about it. Um, but it's it shows something in this team that they have that mental strength to go, right, we're getting this over the line.
Yeah, I do think we slightly differ, I think, on how we view the performance against Livingston, because I don't think it's really good enough. We did hang on. Schwolo, who I had an eye on the entire game, he was very good. I was
Yes.
not pleased with his performance against Hibernian. I personally would have started Craig Gordon, and I know that coming from me is not exactly going to be a shock. I don't think that, and yeah, it's probably harsh for me to say that because Schwolo has been superb. He's third in the SPL in clean sheets, despite only having played 16 games so far this season. But after a doing like that, and it was a doing, it was 3-2, but it was a doing. Like by 50 minutes, Hibs should have been out of sight. We were just lucky that they're Hibs. That was the only reason we were able to get close to coming back into it. In most other teams, we would have been down 5 or 6 nothing by the end of that. It was dreadful. And Schwolo had a nightmare. So I had a close eye on him because I don't want to see that again. He's too good, quite frankly. He's way too good to be that poor. But yeah, he stood the test and passed it with flying colours. He was only challenged a few times, and especially like late on. But yeah, brilliant reflexes. Made a couple of really nice stops. He looked and felt commanding again, which was the opposite of the previous game. So I was very pleased with that. The defence was, I said it earlier about Altona, and more generally, I think the defence was the same. It was solid without being like commanding. We did the job just about. And therein, really, I guess, lies the problem for me because it's not a match where we should be doing the job. It should be a match where we are confident and we're trying to play forward and trying to really, put pressure on the opposition. We
Yeah.
didn't really do that. We had the most of the chances in the first half, but I don't think that at any point we looked like we blew them away in terms of energy levels and stuff, which against this particular Livy team is something that I'm overly thrilled about. Um,
Yeah.
but again,
No,
3 points is 3 points, and especially with
exactly.
Celtic losing the Old Firm derby and the position that put us in to win that game, that takes us six clear. That's massive, and that could be huge for the season as a whole. I do feel like I would have preferred just a bit more of a statement, to go six clear with a bit more style, to look more like a front of the pack side. And victory at the weekend there would have been for me a lot more enjoyable to watch. But as it stood, it was just not a good game of football.
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of another point that I kind of had to make about the game. The reaction from the stands as the second half was unfolding was, to me, and this is something that I don't quite know how to word it without sounding like I'm attacking people, because I'm absolutely not. We have high expectations for our team. Every fan in the country should have high expectations for their team, but I think expectations are rising within our fan base every week because of where we are. And you're absolutely right. We shouldn't need to be hanging on against a Livingston to get 3 points at the end of the day. We absolutely shouldn't. So I
I
agree
would
with you on
say,
that.
yeah, I would say the same if we were third or fourth as well. If a
Yeah,
team has
well,
9 points from the first of the
yes,
season, Hearts should
oh
not be
no,
struggling
definitely.
at home against them. You mentioned the reaction though. I feel like the fans are due some of the blame for that to an extent because, like I say, the reaction, the atmosphere was pish. You know,
Yeah,
like you think back to 2005-06, you think of how lively the stands were every week. You think back to 2014-15 when we won the championship and how lively the stands were every week. Like when we're doing well and the expectations rise, I think that it's only fair that the players and the staff expect more from the fans as well.
yeah.
It's a home game after a tough match. We should be rallying behind them from minute one until minute 90, and that just never was never the case. And so,
No, I totally agree.
in that regard, you can't really blame the players too much for not matching the energy levels or the expectations that apparently were surrounding them because there was no sign of that anywhere in the stands at the weekend.
No, I think you've kind of said how I wanted to say it when I was trying to figure out the words to use. I think you've absolutely nailed it in that sense. I think it's understandable that the expectations are rising because of where we are, but I know a lot of Hearts fans, and as the season's gone on, we've all been saying the same thing. We're enjoying the ride. We'll enjoy it while it lasts. We're up there. We don't expect to be up there at the end of the season, but we'll enjoy it while it lasts. And it seems that I'm not saying that there's any sort of shift from that, but I think a lot of people, myself included, I'm not going to lie to you, are starting to look at it going, right, if we do a mirror image of what we did in the first half of the season in the second half, we will win this league. And that, I think that realization has made people sort of go, right, we should be sticking 6 goals past Livingston. We should be sticking, we should be battering them. And I don't disagree with that. But I think teams will come to Tynecastle and will know the pressure is on Hearts every week now because of where we are. And they'll play on that as well. We should have hammered Livingston on Saturday. We absolutely should have. We had chances to blow them away, but we didn't manage to do it. But like I said the other week when we were talking about a win, at this point, it's points over performances. And I said it in the group chat as well about teams get judged from games like that where we're not playing great, particularly in the second half, but you hold on, you get a win. Yeah, okay, we shouldn't have to hold on against Livingston. I keep repeating that, and I agree with you because that seems to be the general consensus. But having that ability to just get it over the line, and Derek McInnes mentioned it after the game, sometimes 1-0 is enough. And on that day, it was because for as much as, like I say, Livingston had a few chances, Schwolov was equal to all of them, like you mentioned. And I never felt nervous. I never felt that we were in danger of dropping points in that game, albeit I don't like seeing us hang on to a 1-0 win because it's nervous and it's that energy comes from the stands. But the biggest point and this biggest sort of example of that was, and this is a point I wanted to point out, was when Jordi Altena was subbed off and Michael Steinvender was brought on. The reaction to that decision is unacceptable. I heard Hearts fans physically sighing, recoiling at the fact that we're bringing on Steinvender because, listen, Jordi Altena had a very good debut, but Michael Steinvender is a perfectly acceptable right back. He's a perfectly acceptable centre half. He's not a bad football player. But it reminded me of Toby Sibbick getting subbed on in a game and fans going, oh, fuck, here we go. This is the time that we're going to chuck it and he's going to be responsible. Steinvender was nervous when he came on. And that will have to be managed because these players at Hearts have never been in this position before. So, of course, there's going to be nerves. We have to understand that as a fan base and say, right, if the players are nervous, it's our job to drive them on. It's our job to get behind them. Don't criticise them. Get behind them. Michael Steinvender, the first touch he took, or one of the first touches, was he sliced the ball out for a throw-in when it was a simple pass down the line and things like that. That can really stick with a player. We need to be giving them confidence if we feel there is a dip in that.
Yeah, you've pretty much summed it up. Like it's never acceptable to, boo or groan a Hearts player onto the pitch. It's worth remembering as well that Steinvender is one of the two guys that have really come to the rescue for Hearts. That is the weakest position on the field for us. And Steinwender, a guy who's not a natural right back, is a natural centre half. And McEntee, a guy who's not a natural defender, is a natural midfielder. Those two have done their absolute best to plug that hole the best they can. And they've done so, for the most part, just fine. We're top of the league by 6 points. It's those two who have been at right back the vast majority of that time. It's never acceptable, and especially in the case of someone like Steinwender, who's been forced into an uncomfortable position, playing a position that's not his natural position in the field, and he's worked his arse off. I feel for the guy.
Completely.
The people who are reacting to a Hearts player coming on like that, they should have a word with themselves.
Yeah, I totally. It was. I felt like I went on a bit of a rant tangent there, but I do not like to see that. And I think Michael Steinwender has probably been tarred with that ever since that game at Hampden. Getting sent off and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people have that's been their memory of him. But he's a very good defender, and I think, we will just have to ride it out. And as I say, give the players the backing when they need it, because in that moment, at 1-0 up against Livingston, again, we go back to it, we were hanging on. Give the players confidence, get behind them, back them, because if we do, and if Tynecastle is not just for the big games, because we've seen Tynecastle atmospheres for big games, it can be noisy, it can be boisterous, it can be eventful in the stands at Tynecastle for the big games. But like I said earlier on, we've got 18 games to play, and every game is a cup final. I think 7 or 8 of them are at home. Between now and the end of the season, or maybe it's more than that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head when I looked at the fixtures earlier, but we have a role to play in this if this season is going to be one that we will remember for the rest of our lives, because if it happens, it'll be phenomenal. But was there anything else you wanted to touch on from the Livingston game before we kind of move into the Dundee preview and a wee bit on the transfer window as well?
Not especially. No, I was pleasantly surprised in the aftermath of Livingston when I was on social media and I saw that the Livingston chairman shared a status update on their website. I don't know if you saw this, but he basically gave David Martindale and his staff his full backing. They've been dreadful, and he pretty much acknowledges that they've been dreadful. But he says, and that basically that they are. He essentially calls out some of the fans who've been calling for his head, and saying they've got my full backing. You need to get behind them. And that's a team that's got 9 points already on the season. I think we could maybe learn a bit of a lesson from that. That's really the only tiny other wee point that I was going to make, was that, like you say, we have a part to play. If we choose not to play a part, then it's only going to let those nerves seep into the players' minds, because if they're going out there and saying, can we do this? And they're met with nothing, no noise, no chanting, no encouragement, that's when they're going to start to hear their own thoughts more, and they will start to overthink, and they will start to doubt themselves, and then they'll start to make more mistakes, and then we'll start to get grumpy and start booing and start shouting at them, and then it's going to get worse from there. And it comes back to what I said earlier in the season. If that run of 1 in 6 is the worst run that we have this year, then I think we have a chance of winning the league. The way to prevent that from a fan standpoint is to get behind them and back them from minute 1 until minute 90.
Yeah, completely agree. I didn't see the Livingston statement. I'm going to have to check that out once we're done with recording, because it sounds like interesting reading. But yes, the next tie, obviously, Dundee away from home. Informed Dundee away from home. Tough place to go at the moment. They've won their last 3 games. Their last result, obviously, a win in the Dundee Derby. What was the scoreline? I just had it up there. A 1-0 win away from home against Dundee United, albeit just down the road, but still away from home. They've won their last 3 by 1 goal margins. They beat Falkirk 1-0 at home. They followed that up with a 2-1 win against Kilmarnock, and then obviously, as I say, the 1-0 win against Dundee United. Surely Elvis will do us a favour.
I'll tell you, that's going to be a tough game, man. I think a lot of people, when Stephen Pressley was announced as Dundee manager, sort of laughed at it a wee bit and were sort of scoffing at him, and it's like, it's worth remembering who the guy is. He was, and we as Hearts fans should know better. That man was such a leader on the pitch, and off it. It was not a mistake that he was at the centre of that defence when we were last as good as we are now. Um, he knows his stuff, and he's a guy who can lead, and he leads by example. Um, and so he's proven a lot of people wrong. He's got them playing
Yeah,
not great football, but they are in form, as you say, like 3 wins on the bounce. It's not going to be an easy game. They've got a lot of confidence about them. We are, I believe, away from home as well, which is going to add to that. Um, so yeah, tough game coming up.
yeah. I think it's going to be interesting, like you said, and you've said it previously about that run of six where we only won one in six. This game is the sort of game that, as a Hearts fan, you look at and you go, we should win that. In the same way you look at Livingston at home, we should win that. We've played Livingston, we beat them 1-0, we played Dundee away, and then our next tie after that is St Mirren at home. So there's 3 games that you've got to look at and go, 9 points is more than doable. But there is possibilities of slipping up as well, so we will have to be switched on. Dundee haven't been brilliant this season, but like you say, they're picking up points in the games that they need to. They're beating the teams that are down at the bottom of the table with them, so fair play to them for that. We should have enough quality. I believe that we will have enough quality to get a win. It'll be very interesting to see if Islam Sheznikov is involved in some capacity. As I mentioned earlier, he arrived in Edinburgh just, I think, as full time. The full time whistle was blown against Livingston, so he wasn't obviously involved in that game. He wasn't in the stadium, but he was in the stadium after the game doing all the media duties, I would imagine, and then he's had his visa approved today, day of recording. So it'll depend on his fitness. It'll depend on whether he feels himself that he's ready to go. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him at least on the bench. I'll say that. I think I was a little bit surprised to see Jordi Altina thrown in against Livingston, but like I said earlier, I think based off of the fact he only had 2 training sessions, he's obviously shown enough to be put in. Chesnikov might have a little bit more than that. He has been following a fitness plan that the Hearts medical staff provided to him prior to his arrival, because obviously he's not played a competitive game since I think October, November time, I think it is. So that might well play a factor, but it'll be very, very interesting to see. I feel like Chesnikov is one of those players that has been talked about for the last 12 months. The fact that we tried to get him in last January didn't happen. We then tried to get him in the summer, didn't happen, and now we've had to wait till January now to get him. He could be that little player that takes us over the edge, but I think it'll be very, very interesting to see the game against Dundee. I'm going to give you a score prediction. I'm going to go for a Hearts 2-0 win. That's my flag on the mast, shall we say. 2-0 win for the Hearts.
Yeah, to the point about Chesnikov, talk about pressure, eh? Like, if he doesn't come in looking like prime Mohamed Salah, people are going to be so let down. I think it would probably, if he is going to feature in any capacity, it would probably make sense for that reason to start him on the bench. I feel like if you were to just thrust him in there and throw him at the wolves almost, you're putting even more pressure on his shoulders, and they're pretty large shoulders. But like, I think it's probably quite important that we pace ourselves with him. I think when he gets his first start, ideally I think it should come at Tynecastle in front of a home crowd with a decent backing behind him, because we are going to rely on him so much, fair or otherwise, when he does get started, that I think it's important to treat him delicately as we institute that, because it's only going to take a couple of, not even howlers, but like if he's anything less than stellar from the get-go, that some Hearts fans are going to just be down his throat from straight away and say, oh, he's pish, he's overhyped, and he's this and he's that, he's unfit, he's blah blah blah. He's going to be unfit, like you say. He hasn't played a game in a couple of months now, so it's important to manage that. And there's the health aspect of it as well. You say he's been on a fitness plan. Exercising is not the same as game time, so it's going to be important to keep him fit as well. So like, if he gets on the pitch from the start, tries to play 90 minutes and then ends up hurt, then he could end up in an Ageo type situation, albeit a less expensive one. I think he will probably be on the bench, and I think he'll probably feature for the last 15-20 minutes. and I think that he will set up the winner. It's going to be 1-0. It's going to be a rough. I think it's going to be a rough, tough game. I think Elvis is going to set them up to try and make sure that's the case. And I will go with Shanklin to score.
Fair enough. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Just a couple of sort of transfer bits before we wrap up this week. There was some names flying around over the last few days. We're entering the January transfer window. It's time of recording 5th of January, Monday the 5th of January. So the fun and games has only just started, and we're going to be linked to every player under the sun thanks to the Jamestown analytics. I think that's one of the curses of such a fantastic system is you're going to get agents latching onto that, going, "Oh, Hearts want a player, Hearts want him." And the reality is we probably don't want anything to do with them. There's one name that has been brought up. It's again actually a Dundee centre half, Luke Graham, a youngster. He's been playing for the Scotland under-21s. He's a left-footed centre half, 6'3". So I think people are looking at that and going, Stuart Finley's on loan from Oxford. If we feel that this young lad is maybe an upgrade on him, we might not secure Finley on a permanent. Personally, I think we will. But it's a name that's been thrown. I think Aberdeen are interested in him as well, although their managerial situation may well change their targets. Obviously, they parted ways with Jimmy Tillin in the last couple of days. It's been a little bit of a managerial roundabout over the last few days in Scottish football. With
this season, I think in general, you've had 4, 5, if you count both of O'Neill's tenures, Old Firm managers alone, and then you've got Tillin's now gone. It's crazy. Kelly got rid of their manager. Yeah, we've beaten them all senseless, and they're all shat it and ran away.
Apart from Jimmy, we didn't manage that. But it's
we beat Jimmy in the first game of the season, mate.
We did. Yeah, you're right. What am I thinking? We did. So yeah, again, empty station, dogs barking, empty station. But yeah, it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens in the rest of January. Will there be players that go as well as those that come in? Obviously, there's been a few linked. My Prince Forestino being linked with a loan move to Falkirk. Perhaps James Wilson, loan to St Johnstone, is one that's doing the rounds. Elton Kabangu is apparently one that could well be on the move. And we've been linked with forwards. So if we are to bring another forward in, you would imagine that Kabangu or Wilson, or perhaps both, could be making a move at some point. But yeah, it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens in January. I think a point that I always want to make is that Derek McInnes spoke about it before the January window opened, and he said the ultimate goal is to come out the end of January stronger than we are going into it. And you can only do that with auditions, and bringing in guys like Chesnikov and Altina could very well be that next little missing piece that does drive us forward. But it's going to be a very, very interesting ride. Dundee, next game, big game, difficult game. It's another cup final. Like I said earlier, another cup final. Another opportunity for us to get 3 points on the board and try and just keep this going, because let's enjoy it. It's been an unbelievable season. And if anybody said they saw it coming, I want some of whatever they're on, because I don't think any Hearts fan ever saw this coming. But
there were a couple of times even over the course of the year where it felt like, the other shoe is dropping. Like the losses when we've lost games or when we've dropped points. When we got put out of the Premier Sports Cup, like there's been a couple of periods over that 1-6 run. It felt like, I get, we had a great start and it looked like maybe, but this is more like normal service. We're going to it's not going to be catastrophic, but we're going to flatten out a bit, and it'll maybe, we'll probably finish third, fourth. But at this point, we're in early January, we're 6 points clear at the top of the league. And still, neither of the Old Firm are all that convincing. The savant that is Martin O'Neill is back in at Celtic, sadly, so we're going to need to watch out for him. He's one of the best managers to ever manage in Scotland, unfortunately, for us, because Celtic looked adrift, they looked out at sea, they looked creatively bereft. At home and abroad, like as we went to the Roma game and we saw them firsthand, they were all over the place. I think that what he'll bring is organisation, and he will bring a willingness again to Celtic to play for the shirt. So we need to really treat, like you say, these last 18 games like cup finals, because that's essentially what they are. if we drop points in more than a couple of the games against teams that we need to be beaten. It just adds that much more pressure to games against teams like Rangers, Celtic, Hibs, Aberdeen even. So yeah, we need to be picking up points where they are, where we find them, and I think we will this weekend, but I don't think it'll be easy.
Yeah. I think we can leave it there, and I think the best way of rounding it off is, if you're unhappy with a 1-0 win against Livingston, just remember, played 20, won 13, drawn 5, lost 2. We have only lost 2 games since the beginning of the season. Have some perspective. I said it after the Edinburgh Derby as well, after I'd calmed down a little bit after following the 90 minutes. Having perspective and having some form of, just take a breather and remember, 18 cup finals to go. Let's see where we can go, and what a ride it's been.
19 cup finals to go, mate.
Well, 18 domestic games.
When the Hearts go up.
We're doing it, lad. I'm telling you, I'm going to start believing. I'm going to start believing soon. But if you are making the journey to Dundee to support the lads on the weekend coming, so with gusto, I'm sure we'll take a full away support, as we always do. Sold out, I would imagine, by this point. Huge game, another game to tick off the list. Until the next one, we keep going. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for this week, folks. Thank you as ever for listening and watching. You can find our social media links down below in the description. Please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel whilst you are there. Also, you can find us on Spotify at Our Young Podcast. And as I say, all of our socials scrolling across the screen as we speak. Thank you so much for your company this week, John. And here's to another positive episode to talk about next week.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, Happy New Year also. I've gone all this way without saying it to our wonderful listeners. Happy New Year, and here's to hopefully big things happening in 2026. Take care.
If we can make something special happen in 2026 for number 26, that would just be perfect.
Absolutely. Well,
Bye,
take care for now, folks. Bye for now.